To God be the glory in the highest. I greet every one of you in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Our subject of discussion today is refuting one of the supposed contradictions in the Bible. Now, what I want to consider today is, was Jesus crucified on daytime before the Passover meal or daytime after the Passover meal? Number one, after the Passover meal, Mark chapter 14 verses 12 to 17. Number two, before the Passover meal, John chapter 13 verses 30, John chapter 13 verses 29, John chapter 18 verses 28, John chapter 19 verses 14. I'm about to tell you today that Jesus Christ was crucified not before the Passover meal or after the Passover meal. It was during the Passover meal that Christ was crucified. Now, in the book of Matthew chapter 26, what is Passover meal? Passover meal is a what? Is a feast that God gave the people of Israel to carry out for 7 days. In the book of Exodus chapter 23 verses 15, I read, "Thou shalt keep the feast of unleavened bread." Unleavened bread is also known as Passover. "Thou shalt eat unleavened bread 7 days, as I commanded thee in the time appointed to the month of Abib. For in it thou camest from Egypt, and none shall appear before me empty." So that Passover meal is when they are going to kill a lamb and eat unleavened bread. So it is a program of 7 days. But in the book of Matthew chapter 26 verses 17 to 34, it was said that on the first day of Passover, Jesus Christ ate the Last Supper. The Last Supper Jesus Christ ate with his disciple was on the first day of the Passover. Now, that is found in Matthew chapter 26 verses 17 to 34. But on the second day and it was that day, that night, that Jesus Christ was arrested. The first night of the Passover is when Christ was arrested by what? By the soldiers. But in Matthew chapter 27 verses 2 and John chapter 18 verses 28, it is the second morning. It is the second day, morning of the second day of the Passover. John chapter 18 verses 28 and Matthew chapter 27 verses 2 is the what? Is the second day of the Passover. Early in the morning, they took Jesus Christ to what? To Pilate, the governor. So as you can now, it is the custom of the Jews that whenever they want to eat Passover in all the 7 days, they must not be defiled. What the non-Christian said is that John chapter 18 verses 28 simply means that simply means that Jesus Christ, the Jews just want to start eating the Passover. No. John chapter 18 verses 28 does not mean that they are trying to eat the Passover. They want to begin the Passover that day. Because in John chapter 18 verses 28, I read, "Then led they Jesus from Caiaphas unto the hall of judgment, and it was early, and they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover." That John chapter 18 verses 28 talks about the second day of the Passover. Because before Jesus Christ was arrested, he has eaten the Passover, which is what? With his disciple. And was that night that Jesus Christ was taken. Also in the book of Matthew chapter 27 verses 15, it was said that at the Passover feast, which I told you before that it takes 7 days, the governor was to release a prisoner. And in Matthew chapter 27 verses 26, Pilate released Barabbas unto them before he released Jesus. So that shows us that when Christ was taken to Pilate, the Passover feast have started. So Christ was not killed before the Passover or after the Passover. It was during the 7-day feast of the Passover that Christ was killed. So there's no contradiction in what we have said, that when was Jesus Christ killed? Is it before the Passover or after the Passover? Christ was killed during the Passover, because according to the book of John chapter 18 verses 28 and Matthew chapter 27 verses 2, Jesus Christ was not killed before or after, but during the Passover. Before or after, but during the Passover,